All right. Well, let's formally start this program. We are the Menomonee River Area chapter of Wild Ones. Wild Ones is a national organization, national nonprofit organization devoted to the promotion of simply encouraging people to plant native plants. The Wild Ones mission statement is that we promote the use of native plants and environmentally sound landscaping practices to preserve biodiversity through the preservation, restoration, and establishment of native plant communities. So first of all, some business. We are recording this program and we will be posting it on YouTube, and we'll post a link on our website. So if you do not want to be seen or heard in either of those places, please mute yourself and please turn off your camera. If you do not do that, then we are assuming consent that you agree that you may be visible on those on YouTube. Okay, and that's the piece of business that we have. I apologize for the difficulty with technology tonight. It turns out that there was a conflict with another chapter. The events calendar on wildones.org, our national website, is packed with programs. And Zoom meetings, of course, are extremely popular. We've had a great outpouring of inquiries, questions, people looking for links for this program. So I am so excited. I'm sorry, let me introduce myself. I'm Lisa Otis, the president of the Menomonee River Area chapter of Wild Ones. I am so excited to kick off our 2023 program schedule with such a published and renowned author, also a president of the Kettle Moraine chapter. We'll get to her introduction. Carolyn will introduce her formally in just a couple minutes. Just wanted to emphasize that our 2023 program lineup is available. We'll be posting it to our website. We have some excellent programs. The kickoff tonight, obviously already a great response to it. Native landscaping for birds. Next month, we have an in-person, our first since the beginning of COVID, in-person live presentation by none other than Mike Yanni, who I'm sure many of you recognize the name. He's been a longtime propagator of native plants, has worked with Johnson's Nursery, and is just in his own right a stand-up comedian, even though he's not a professional. The program promises to be entertaining, and we will be in person. So yay. March, we will be doing another Zoom program, Wisconsin's Rare Plants, with DNR Representative Kevin Doyle. And then April, we are going to be having another in-person program, and this will be a kickoff for one of our summer yard tours. And this spring and summer and into fall, we are focusing on member yard tours. These programs have been hugely popular in the past. It's a great opportunity to see what other members are doing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. My yard's in there. There's going to be some ugly. So I'm just going to say that, a yard tour does not have to be perfect. We are all learning from each other. That's the mission of Wild Ones. And the yard tours promise to be, I'm sure, a great success. Those will be for members only, out of respect of privacy for our members. And addresses will be shared at future times, at future dates before the programs. We will also have our month of native plant sale at Johnson's Nursery. Again, everything the same. Members will receive 40% off the whole month of June 1st to June 30th. I want to thank some of our members that have already volunteered to help out at the plant sale. I'd like to have members there on weekends so that we can help our other members and other customers figure out what they want to do, what they should buy, and how they can get natives into their own backyards. We do towards the end of the season, we'll have another seed harvesting workshop at our members' yard, Mary Jane Swedberg. That our harvesting workshop this past year, 2022, was very popular and very well attended. So I look forward to that program as well. And we will end the year with our annual seed and treat exchange. details still need to be determined, but we are going to have that program. So far, it will be in person. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your patience. And again, our apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll get this down for the next meeting for sure. I'd like to turn over to Carolyn, who has been an unbelievable resource for arranging these programs, organizing our schedule. Carolyn, you have done a fantastic job with the 2023 program schedule. Thank you all so much. Carolyn, you're muted. Hey, Carolyn, you're muted.
Sorry. We're so excited to have Mariette with us this evening. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. She has published the book Birdscaping in the Midwest, a guide to gardening with native plants to attract birds. She's also written numerous articles on natural history topics from various publications. She served as a director of Ware Nature Center in Milwaukee for 18 years. I didn't know that. She and her husband, Dave, had created a bird sanctuary on their 2-acre property in South Kettle Moraine near East Troy. She's an avid birder and past member of Wisconsin Society of Ornithology, a current member of the Ben Goss Bird Club. She's active, very active with Wild Ones. She's the current president of the Kettle Moraine chapter. And she's also does local activism with her county's park committee. Her education also, I never knew, includes a master's in botany and zoology from University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. We are so pleased to have you with us this evening. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. That was a very nice, thorough introduction, and I really appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to share my screen now. And I just want to warn people, my voice isn't too bad right now, but I do have laryngitis, so I hope it'll last. So here we go. And let's see if you, let's see. Do you all see it now? Oh, good, good. Some people are shaking their heads. Yeah, great. Okay.
Yes, we do, Mariette. Thank you.
Oh, great. I think I'm going to try to get this off the screen here. Well, anyway, and if you have questions, by the way, feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, there it goes. And people can ask questions later. So this is, of course, the title of my book and talk tonight. And oops, it's not moving. What's wrong here? There. Ah. That's odd. I shared the screen. Now, and this, oh, there we go. Okay, I guess I have to do it harder tonight. I never had that problem either. Let's hope we get through this. Okay, well, this talk is about landscaping for birds and using our wonderful Wisconsin flowers and shrubs and so forth to increase the birds in our and help support birds in our landscaping. And this, for example, is a yellow warbler nesting in 9-bark, a wonderful shrub. And I've seen more nests in 9-bark than in any other shrub. And for example, birds like this don't come to feeders. They'll visit your yard if you have habitat that interests them during their migration. Good stopover habitat, for example. This gives you an example of the number of birds that might come to your feeder. This larger pie chart here represents North American birds. We have up to over 900 species, but only 11% of them ever come to feeders. These smaller ones down here represent yards with native landscaping. This, can you see my pointer at all? Anybody? No. Well, anyway.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So this represents my yard when I lived in Greendale, a suburb of Milwaukee. And I had only a fourth of an acre, and I had up to 80 different species of birds visiting, but of them, only a third ever came to my feeders. This other one represents the yard of Craig Tufts, the late chief naturalist for the National Wildlife Federation. And he had an acre of property, and he said of the 99 birds that visited his property, only 21, and in this case it actually was 21% of the birds came to his feeders. So we have to do more than just feeders, which I imagine many of you have in the winter. I do too, but I also have lots of native plants. This is an example of a very small front yard that nonetheless is great for birds and insects. The bee balm attracts hummingbirds, and there's flowers down here that attract insects for insect eaters. And then when they go to seed, all of those plants will attract finches and sparrows who might want to eat seeds in the fall and winter. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. This is my home when I lived in Greendale. The front yard was the sunniest, so that's where I put my prairie. And I always like to mention that I sold my house in 1 week to people who love the landscaping. And native landscaping is becoming more and more popular. And Money Magazine some years ago said that if you plant with regional plants, like regionally native plants, and have less lawn, that you can raise the value of your property by about 10%. So good for money, good for nature, and good for you. Yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know why. You can see the whole picture, right? You don't see that little top part, which I seem to not be able to get rid of.
You're fine, Mariette. You're fine.
Good. Okay. Well, of course, it's less work mowing, but it's also less pollution. A few years back, Berkeley Health Newsletter said that mowing your lawn with a gas machine like this cartoon shows is equivalent to jogging in smog. So save your lungs and save time with native landscaping. Oops, come on. There we go. Okay. Of course, I think most wild ones, in fact, maybe most people today know that we have problems with exotic, or that's another word for non-native species. And of course, buckthorn and honeysuckle are two of our worst invasive shrubs. There was a study at the Morton Arboretum in Illinois, which, if you visited that arboretum, it's just south of the Wisconsin border, so it's not too far from here. And they did a study of songbird nest success in non-native shrubs and also native shrubs. And the results are shown here: significantly more predation in exotic shrubs. So another good reason to get rid of those invasives. Good for birds. This is our pet cat. Cats are also invasive, as I think is becoming better known now. In fact, it's considered one of the top 100 invasive species in the world, according to a top research group. And so when we noticed our cat was outdoors, as you see here, catching birds and mice and so forth, we decided to keep it indoors. And the American Bird Conservancy has a great site on how to keep your cat safe, happy indoors. And also, as many people know, veterinarians encourage you to do so because it's better for the cats. They don't pick up diseases, they don't get hit by cars. So keep your cats indoors for them, for you, and for nature, and for birds. Here's an example of a great number of birds that are killed by cats every year. And these cats include feral, stray, and pet cats. So, and this is a compilation of 21 different studies. The estimate, as you see here, 2.4 billion birds, a median estimate. So it could be quite a bit more, up to almost 5 here, as you can see down there. And of course, many mammals that are native to us are also killed by cats. So cats aren't really part of our ecosystem. They didn't evolve here and are not really native here. So keep those indoors, those cats indoors. Now, windows are another big reason that birds die. They don't see the windows. And sadly, some of our most beautiful little birds are really vulnerable. Here you see a black and white warbler, one of the 7 most common birds to fly. On the other side here, we have Zen window curtains, which is one solution. There are many others, but this is my neighbor's. And I hired her, and she has done my windows like this too. And what this is just kind of, I think they have used parachute cord and hang it from the top to the bottom of the windows with a certain space. I think it's like 4 or 5 inches apart. And that helps birds to see the window. And it's been a really great solution. And I actually think it looks rather attractive. It kind of has a architectural aesthetic, I think. So consider that, but you can go on the web and there's tons of other solutions. But I've tried various ones. I still have some of those little decals on some of the windows where they never really hit, but I like to protect everything. But I have these on quite a few of my large windows. So this, what's a native plant? Now this may seem like a kind of stupid question for wild ones, but actually I've gotten questions on this on talks, and also we have many new members. So I just like to emphasize that native plants are more than just a pretty face, I like to say. And here's one of the definitions I particularly like. There's a little variation. A native plant species is one that has evolved in a given place, say Wisconsin or say southeastern Wisconsin, Milwaukee, whatever, and has developed essential relationships with other organisms in a given ecological community. And that means relationships with bees, birds, bats, all of nature, all the fauna, so that they support, give cover, food, etc. to these other animals. So here are some examples of why exactly native plants are best. There's more birds in areas with native plants. Actually, they've done studies of even one city where part of the city has more native plants than others, and the birds were more abundant. There's been at least 2 that I know of studies in that regard. And there's more nectar in native plants for our hummingbirds. Oops, let's get that out of the way. There's, and then number 3 is basically that Illinois study that I talked about, less apt to be preyed upon. There's also more insects for birds, and that's because let me get this out of the way. I hope you don't see all that. Whoops, sorry about that. The insects do not have the enzymes to feed on the non-native plants. They haven't evolved with these plants and developed adaptations as they had with our native plants. So, and of course, we need insects for birds, especially those caterpillars, which I'll talk about soon. And there's more variety for food for birds. Instead of having all of those invasive, monocultures, you can plant just a great variety of food for birds, shrubs that'll have berries early, late, and even into winter. And they sustain many other species, bees, bats, and all kinds of bugs that are important for our ecosystems. And they're generally easier to grow because if you plant the right place, the right native plant in the right place, they're easier to grow. They're adapted to those situations. And they always advise that you don't use cultivars of native plants, mainly because we can't study all the plants. And some of those have been, a good number have been shown to be not as good as our native plants, because when horticulturists create a cultivar, it changes the plants in some way, and often not for the best for birds and insects and so forth. For example, here's purple coneflower. Studies have definitely shown that birds prefer the true native purple coneflower to the cultivars, especially those that are colored in different ways, like this white swan on the one side of the screen. And not only that, a lot of the cultivars of purple coneflower They're not liked by the bees as much. And also, they sometimes are changed so much that they don't even produce any seed. And anybody who has purple coneflower in their yards knows that when they go to seed, there's always lots of goldfinches and so forth feeding on those seeds. So you've gotten rid of all you've protected your windows, you don't let your cat outside, etc. So now you're ready to plant for the birds. Of course, we want to plant food, various kinds of food for the birds, and we'll discuss that soon. Cover and nesting sites. The same plants that you plant for food for the birds will offer them cover and nesting sites. And of course, water. Especially in city urban areas, the water has been, kind of drained away, even underground and so forth, and we've lost our wetlands. And another thing, though, is that the birds especially like dripping water. And this is a bird bath I have in my yard. And when I have this up here, it has a nice dripping that attracts birds. As you can see, all these beautiful cedar waxwings are enjoying a good bath. So food through the seasons, berries, you can certainly do that. Service berry in the spring, for example, mulberries and raspberries and so forth in the middle of the summer. And then, viburnums and other shrubs that produce berries for the fall and even into winter. And you want to plant seed when the plants go to seed, especially our prairie plants and grasses, they offer seeds for seed ears like this winter-colored goldfinch. And nectar, of course, we all love our hummingbirds and want to do the most for them. And the best plants are native plants. And insects, of course. Here is a bluebird with a little caterpillar. That's the prime food for nestlings, so those caterpillars. And here's an example of chickadees. They need 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to feed their nestlings and to be successful. This was proven in a study by Desiree Narango, and she found that chickadees require 70% native plants for survival of nestlings. So 70%, that's what we need as our goal in our yards, at least 70%. No one realized, for example, that by planting ornamental, non-native plants, we've actually been starving birds. Who would have thought? But now that we know, we have to strive to plant as many native plants as possible. And this is what has happened since we have so many cultivars and non-native plants and invasives. 3 billion birds have been lost since 1970. And white-throated sparrows, I used to hear a lot more of them. And many of you who are birders perhaps have too. But they especially sing in spring. They don't generally nest here, but we don't hear them as much, and they have a lovely spring song. So they're down by 90 million. And leaf litter is great for birds like the white-throated sparrows and also other birds that are ground feeders. That leaf litter shelters and produces all kinds of insects for insect-eating birds. So you may have all heard that mantra, leave the leaves. And I hope you have done that this fall. Of course, we all want to avoid pesticides, which we don't want to kill or poison the foods we're offering to the birds. Now, cover and nesting sites is as I mentioned, our native plants produce those, and here are just a few tips. One thing is to try to have different layers of plants. In this case, you see trees, shrubs, and herbaceous species. And the reason you want to do that is because different birds like different parts of the landscape, and sometimes they just want different layers of the landscape, depending on what cycle they're in their nesting. For example, thrashers usually sing in the treetops in spring as many birders know. But when they get down to nesting, they're nesting in the shrubs layer or even on the ground. And of course, evergreens are great cover too. These are red cedars and a juniper shrub here. They're great. Any evergreens are great in winter like this. Of course, we haven't had too much snow this winter, but they offer a lot of shelter for the birds in bad weather or in winter. And also, I have noted in my yard that birds tend to nest in them early in the season when our deciduous shrubs and trees haven't leafed out yet. Dead and fallen trees are great too. They harbor a lot of insects, especially for woodland birds like owls and woodpeckers and so forth. And they enrich the soil too, of course, as they decay. Dead standing trees or snags are also very important for birds. About 50 different species of Midwestern birds use snags at one time or another in their life cycle. Of course, we're all aware of woodpeckers digging the cavities in the trees, and these cavities are used by other birds in future years. For example, the wood duck nests in large cavities made by our largest woodpecker, the pileated woodpecker. But while you're waiting for cavities to develop in your yard, you can put up bird houses, which have helped birds immensely, especially has helped the bluebirds. And many of you have probably heard of Bluebird Trails, a series of bird houses. They were actually in the 1950s, there were some bad storms and so forth, winter weather. And they believe that putting up bird houses really helps keep them from extinction. We talked about water a bit earlier, and here's an example of water garden in my yard. I have now extended this. Now we have a little stream here, and I have to say that they like streams even better. But you can plant your native plants around it, and it's here I have a little dripping water, and I also have done that with that little stream, which kind of drips from one to another layer. And that's, as I said, that's very shallow and even more popular with the birds. But again, dripping water is a great attractive. And of course, our water lilies are quintessential water plants. This is the native one, of course. And then they go to seed and are eaten by ducks and geese and so forth. And if you have a little wet shrubby area, you might get this common yellow-throat warbler, a lovely warbler that's quite common and nests quite abundantly in our state. Or maybe some herons, like this is a smaller green heron, or maybe you're leaving, if you have a big pond, you'll get the great blue heron. Now I'm going to show you some examples of what has happened to people who have planted native, who have actually the before and after pictures. Here's a before picture of a couple in Columbus, Ohio. They gave a whole program that I once attended. And here they have basically a lawn, non-native plants. And this is their after picture. They planted a lot of native plants in the front yard and in the backyard. And then they studied the changes. And here's what they found. As they increased the species of plants, you can see from 3, eventually they had 113. And the insects, that includes our great bees and butterflies, increased greatly. Birds increased greatly. Oh, here are the butterflies, excuse me, they're not included in the other bugs. There were fireflies though, and here, and all of us are a little concerned about the loss, not having as much abundance of fireflies these days. And even mammals, the small mammals, increased. And here is a study that was done by Dr. Talamy, the author of Bringing Nature Home and other books. And wonderful books, by the way, and I hope you all read them. He and his students studied birds at a dozen properties. And first of all, this one, the native, of course, is here, and the conventional. And you can see that there were more birds in the native properties. And also there were more, if you look at this bar graph down here, there were more different kinds of birds. So in both cases, native plants really made a difference. And at those same properties, they studied caterpillar abundance. And as I mentioned, caterpillars, and as you saw with that chickadee study, caterpillars are so important to reproduction for birds. I want to point out the sizes of the properties. These were true for the bar graphs before too. One, they kind of match the properties in size. The conventional, in this case, were the non-native properties. And then here, the green dots here are the native properties. And the native properties, no matter what size yard, they had more caterpillars. And the yard started at 1/3 size, and each case a native and non-native yard. Excuse me, my voice is going here. And then it went up to about 10 acres in size. So the 10-acre size also had considerably more caterpillars. So again, proof that native landscaping works, and we can really support our birds and our caterpillars and our bees for that matter better too. And it's so important. I don't know how many of you have heard this terrible statistic. Over 40% of insects are threatened with extinction worldwide. And we all love our butterflies so much. And here, butterflies and moths are among the most affected. And this was by a study in a biological conservation paper in April 2019. In my book, I talk about different gardens you can have. So you can choose to specialize if you like. And of course, birds are always important, are always so popular. And here are two native flowers that kind of frame the year for hummingbirds. The wild columbine is one of the first to blossom, which has a lot of nectar for the hummingbirds. And there's some ornithologists believe that the hummingbirds actually follow the blossoming of the wild columbine as they migrate north, and vice versa for the jewelweed. That's one of our last native flowers that have a lot of nectar for the hummingbirds, and the hummingbirds tend to follow that south in fall. Of course, we have wonderful hummingbird flowers throughout the year. Cardinal flowers are always a favorite. And if you're lucky, you may get a hummingbird nesting in your yard. This little lichen-covered nest, you can see the two babies in there with mom. Here's a little spot where in Greendale, that suburb, we created a little hummingbird spot. We had mostly grass, just like our neighbors back here. And we decided that we were going to plant some shrubs in the background. And then we planted some of the favorite hummingbird native flowers in the foreground here. And that was we didn't get them all year long, but we did get them during migration. Prairie gardens are, the quintessential garden or ecosystem, you might say, in America. No other continent had prairies. And many of you know Pat Bruss, the president of the Where Wild Ones chapter, Where Nature Centers chapter. And that's her home back there. And she lives on a corner lot with her husband, Carl, and they have this beautiful prairie on the corner. And prairies, large or small, will attract goldfinches, as you see here, and other prairie birds. Here's a home in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the owner said that they're always getting compliments on their flowers from passerbys. You can see how close it is to the sidewalk there. And here is our home in the South Kill Moraine, with the before picture. You can see there was not much there except long grass down there. And then that's a little slope toward the bottom of the picture that you see, and that was old field grasses. Well, we didn't keep that long. We have a little lawn around the house so we can get around and paint it and so forth. But we did add these flowers and some bird feeders. And we have a septic system now. They're great for prairies. You don't want shrubs or trees. Those roots can harm a septic system, but prairie plants do just fine. And this is a little bit more shorter wildflowers and grasses than the other prairie. So this is just a little patch on my septic field. And that's my home in the background there. Of course, rain gardens are also popular and very encouraged for environmental reasons. Keep that water on your property, keep pollutants from running into our waterways and so forth. But they're also great for birds. As little as this is, it can attract hummingbirds with these flowers, cedar just later in the season when the plants go to seed. Here's a larger one in Milwaukee, which I love because it has such a great variety. When you have a larger landscape, of course, you have a greater chance to add more wildflowers. Savanna gardens are another possibility for your property. Savannas are really scattered trees with prairie beneath. And the classic savanna tree in our area is the oak. And here's a big oak over in this photo here. In our yards, often when we buy a property, what does it often have? At least a tree or so and a lawn. So the tree can be a stand-in for an oak if you don't have an oak, and you can kind of create a savanna landscape. And when oaks go to flower, by the way, these are the flowers hanging down, and the leaves are quite small yet. That's the time when there are lots and lots of caterpillars on those oaks. And I don't know if you can see the tiny little caterpillar in the beak of this chickadee, but also warblers particularly like to search out oak trees when they're migrating because of all those caterpillars that they find. This is when I was younger and still had brown hair. And this is an oak that we had planted years ago, and I'm planting herbaceous species below that oak to create a little savanna corner in our Greendale yard. And the trunk back there, that's that oak that you saw in the first picture, and we planted a number of native plants beneath it. And we had our sump pump flowing to that area, and that's why we could plant a wetland plant, which I bet if I were alive, I'd ask you what this is. Of course, that's Joe Pye weed. So that grew very well because our sump pump drained there. Again, keep that water on your property so you can grow plants that you would otherwise not be able to. And this is a kind of a little savanna look in the front of our house. This was all grass originally too. And while this isn't an oak tree, it's a silver maple, but nonetheless, it kind of gives you that oak savanna look with native plants surrounding it. And that's the front of our home. And this is what it looks like from the front door. And you can see some of the grasses are growing here. They'll be more outstanding later in the summer. This is a savanna-like setting in Madison, the home of a professor in the horticulture department. And his tree back there is a hickory. And then he has some shrubs and then herbaceous plants below it. And you can see the sidewalk right here. So it's another little mini savanna. So you can create this so easily at your homes. Shrubland gardens too, we're losing some of our great shrubland birds. And in this case, they planted a variety of shrubs. It's early fall and the shrubs are starting to color up. You can see some of the trees are in color back there. So it was a nice edge for their sidewalk. And here are some of the beautiful birds we can attract with shrubs. The indigo bunting, nests, and lives completely in shrubs, so we certainly want to keep that little bird around. And the towhee here, you can see it on the ground again, on a bird that likes those leaves. It also is a shrubland bird, so important to keep those beautiful birds around. And we have wonderful native shrubs. Dogwoods are a great group of shrubs, and there's a variety. So you'll probably have a shrub that would do just fine in your yard. Some of them are more wetland species, some like a drier. This particular one is a gray dogwood, not one to plant near prairies. It can really kind of take over a prairie patch, but otherwise it's a beautiful one, and the birds just love those berries. A pagoda dogwood is another of my favorites. That's my garage in the background, and you can see why it's called pagoda. The branches are sort of in layers like a pagoda. It has wonderful flowers, as you see down below in that little box. So, oops, let me make sure that's on your screen. So I really love this one, and it's one that likes a little shade and just moist, average soil. Now, viburnums, some of them have been attacked recently, but the black haw viburnum that's shown here, again, this is in my yard, is one that's more resistant to that viburnum beetle. From what I've heard, though, the beetle is not quite as bad a pest as it has been, and I hope that's true for you. It definitely has diminished out east. I talked to some horticulturists from out east, and they said it's greatly diminishing now, so that's good. Maybe some natural controls have developed. So woodland gardens, of course, if you have wood, or you can even create a woods, just make sure you get those invasive shrubs out, have a natural understory of native plants, and you might attract a cute little screech owl like this one. I love the red phase, as you see here. The gray phase is more common. And here's some great woodland trees. Some of you may be familiar that Professor Doug Tallamy, who wrote that book I mentioned, Bring Nature Home, has a list of the trees according to how many caterpillars they support. And that's so important for birds. So here you see the oak is the top species, 500 caterpillar species. Of course, some of them are not on every tree, but it's the top tree to support birds. Cherries too I think that's the second best as far as the caterpillars. So this is a beautiful black cherry in the fall of the year. And a little front yard with that's wooded. And you can certainly create a nice native landscape in your front yard too, if it happens to be wooded. So it's so important to do this. We have 1 million animal and plant species that are threatened with extinction. This is according to that, as you see below, the UN Biodiversity Report. And as it says, transformative changes are needed. We need to transform our yards, our church yards, our schoolyards, every place we can. And why should we? And of course, you know how urgent it is. Code red for humanity, as the UN report said. And then Audubon has done a thorough study too, and they have stated that 2/3 of, as you can see down here, 2/3 of North American bird species are at increasing risk of extinction from global temperature rise. Right, just take a little drink here. So as far as global climate change and so forth, it's good news that we can actually help store garbage in tall grass prairies. Many of you have heard of trees, of course, they're great too, but even prairies, look at what they have stated, 1/2 to 2 tons carbon is stored per acre per year in prairies. And they store, some of them store more, 50% more than forests in temperate zones. So very I think it's important to know because many of us live in prairie areas. And one of the reasons is that they have such deep roots that improve the soil, and there's carbon in those roots and add to the carbon storage. So I hope all of you have seen that nice brochure that National Wildlands have put out as far as gardening for climate change. I'm not quite sure if that's the title, but as you can see here, a third of the carbon in the atmosphere today used to be in the soil, and modern farming is largely to blame. So what can we do? Here are a few tips that we could do to rebuild soil. Avoid digging or tilling as much as possible. Plant perennials. Stop fertilizing and compost instead. Those thoughts are from The Hidden Carbon Trap in Your Yard. It's all about soil, written by Janet Marinelli, and she writes for the New York Botanical Garden. Of course, trees are great, especially our oaks. Large, long-lived, and dense. They are ideal for carbon storage. And another book by Doug Tallamy is The Nature of Oaks, a wonderful book, and it's a short one too. You should definitely read it. You can get it from the library, as all of his books, as I did, in fact, get that one. And I love this picture that my husband took. That's a little cabin in the Kettle Moraine, and this great, beautiful oak above it in the wintertime. So I wonder how many of you have heard about the 30 by 30 plan. If we implemented that, we could protect 75% of world species and slow climate change by storing carbon in plants and soil. The last time I gave a talk in person, no one knew about this, but there was an executive order that President Biden gave on January in 2021, and it establishes the goal of conserving 30% of US lands and waters by 2030. And this 30 by 30 plan is supported by the Nature Conservancy, the Wilderness Society, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Audubon Society, and probably a lot more. And as you'll know below there, natural climate solutions can provide 37% of cost-effective CO2 mitigation needed by 2030. So all of us in Wild Ones are really doing our part by trying to establish the native vegetation and conserving 30%, at least 30%, and I suggest 75%, as that study with the chickadees indicated. So let's do our part to save those lands and transform our properties, our school properties, business properties, and so forth. And we'll not only save birds and hopefully increase their reproduction and numbers, but we'll also save our butterflies, whom we all love, and bees, which are declining too. We'll do our part for all of them, and it's beautiful too. And beautiful landscapes that are so great for nature. And I love this quote by Peter Raven, who now he's the retired president of the Missouri Botanical Gardens. We have relatively short lives, and yet by preserving the world in a condition that is worthy of us, we win a kind of immortality. We become stewards of the earth, and our work lives on generation after generation. So I hope you all keep that in mind. It certainly is inspiring to me. Now I'll take any questions that you might have. I can leave that up. Are there any questions? I don't know who's monitoring the chat.
Yeah. Yes, Mariette, there were a number of questions that came up, and first one was that dripper that you showed in one of your pictures electric?
No, it's just, well, I just turn on the hose. It's connected to the hose outlet. So you just turn on the hose. So I guess in the end, is that electric? I suppose. But it's not electric. It's just like if you had your hose on very minimally. In fact, my husband studied once how much water we were using. It was very, very minimal because that drip is such a small little drip. Does that
Okay.
answer the question? Hello?
I think so. Yeah, that was the question that was asked. If the person who asked that question would like any more information, please type it in the chat. So then there was another question. It says, we have buckthorns in our woods. We have given up hope that we can get rid of it. We are now just keeping it short. My husband would like to plant a shagbark hickory tree. I would like to plant a bur oak. What are your thoughts on the hickory tree? Is this native to Wisconsin? Does it have any benefits to the native ecosystem?
Oh, hickory trees are wonderful. I love them. One of my favorites. In fact, there is a kind of an oak hickory woodland kind of ecosystem. So yeah, in areas where it's actually oak woods, it would be oak hickory that's very commonly added together. But I would like to also mention that we have a member who had one of the worst invasive woodlands full of buckthorn that a DNR man had seen, a DNR naturalist. And she has done a wonderful job of getting rid of it all. And we also, she and some others have written a good description of how to get rid of buckthorn. So I would suggest that you do it. I can send that to Lisa so she can give it, send it out to people. But I would also suggest that you get rid of that and do it just one part at a time, a little at a time. But you said you cut it, but I know some people don't like to use poisons or herbicides. But the best thing is just to cut it and put a little of that poison, whatever herbicide you decide to use, just on the stump. You just have to paint a tiny little bit, and you can kill them that way. And it might be something you have to get back to because there's a lot of berries still in the ground and so forth. But I would never give up on getting rid of buckthorn, and I've seen it. So I can even put you in contact with this person who's gotten rid of the worst stand of buckthorn that someone had seen. So let me know, Lisa, and so forth, if you'd like that write-up, and I can always check to see if this person would be willing to talk to someone who's given up on buckthorn.
Mariette, that would be great. Please do forward that information because many of us have that problem, myself included. And that would certainly be material for a presentation, but also just to share knowledge with those of us that are battling it. And sorry, my dog is going crazy in the background, so I'll mute again.
Well, that's great. Yes. Actually, almost everybody it seems to have that problem. We have a small woodland on our property too, and it took us a few years to get the buckthorn and honeysuckle out, but it can be done. And we had just a small area, but this other woman, it's just amazing what she has accomplished. So, okay, any other questions?
Yes, there's one on what suggestions do you have for lower growing evergreens in a suburban yard?
Well, I would say the common juniper, and also there's a second species that sometimes called, is it horizontal juniper? They are very low growing. That one is especially low growing. The common juniper shrub is maybe about 2-3 feet high. I have that one in my yard. So yeah, I like those a lot. And I noticed in the winter, a lot of juncos actually crawl under there for a little shelter. And a cardinal once nested in the shrub. So great. Yeah. And I think you can get native ones at Johnson's Nursery and some other nurseries. So that's an excellent idea.
Okay, just a few more questions, a couple that I had. One of your slides, you highlighted that there were 90 million less white-throated sparrows is that because of a specific loss of plant or just a general habitat, or is there something that
No,
is
yeah, no,
specific to that bird?
as far as I know, that was just one of the birds that was highlighted in Audubon's study about how many birds were lost. You know, those billions of birds that were lost, but they just kind of determined in some cases how many of one species were lost over the years. And that's because they had breeding bird surveys over the years and have some good records. So I think that's just all they know is that's what happened. And of course, we all know that there was loss of habitat, the invasives and so forth, which are always major reasons for the loss of species.
And I thought the prairie that you created around your Kettle Moraine home was so beautiful. Did you need to kill the grass before establishing that? Or
That's a good question. You know, my husband didn't want to do that, but I don't recommend that. What we did is we put the flowers there, and then over time we finally got rid of the grasses. And sometimes I just took the seed heads off and so forth. But it's a much bigger chore. I do not recommend it doing that way because it takes longer to make it look nice. But it did work. But it was a hillside too in that one spot. So I don't know, and we had two prairies that I showed, the one on that had a little hill. We were a little afraid of erosion too. So we just popped plants in there. But again, it's a little bit of a struggle, and we do burn too. Burning in spring helps keep down those non-native grasses.
I know a lot of people also smother.
Right, I have done that in sections too.
Plastic, cardboard, rather
Uh-huh.
than having to use the herbicides.
Right, yes.
okay, thank you. We have another question. I have noticed a definite decline in goldfinches in the last couple of years. Has that been your experience? We used to have a lot more in our yard.
I agree with you, and I'm not quite sure, although I do think that house finches and might be a little bit aggressive too, and I have a lot of house finches, more than I had in the past. I also have read, and I can't recall where I read it, that there are some who feel that house finches have been responsible for a kind of a decline in goldfinches. But I definitely have less too. And another problem is this, the seed, the finch seed, the Niger seed. Somehow they don't like it as much. And I think part of it sometimes is that I have heard there's different treatments of it when it's imported and so forth. I don't know why, but I don't even feed Niger seed anymore. I just feed sunflower chips because I've tried different bags of it. I mean, and the interesting thing is different people have completely different results. Some people have great luck with Niger seed and some don't, and I don't. I don't know if other people here have had that problem or not.
We had a problem with it, and we found that if we put smaller amounts out, that if it got wet, it seems to mildew or mold or something. So we, instead of filling it all the way to the top, we only put in about 3 inches, and then it goes, they eat it faster, and then we replace it and clean it. So I think putting a large amount seems to, it goes bad, or the dampness or something changes. So
That's a
we've
good
done
idea.
that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank. I might try that. Another thing is that I do know about Niger seed. It can get kind of old quickly, so you never want to buy too much, because that's always been said that you kind of, I don't know if it gets moldy when it's saved even, or in the garage or whatever, but yeah, just get small amounts. Yeah, but I never thought of putting a small amount in the feeder. I'm going to try that. Thank you for the suggestion. Excuse me, suggestion.
Yeah, I reduced the size of the feeder I use for finches as well, and found a mix of the sunflower chips with a little bit of thistle in it. And the finches love it, as well as many of the other birds, nuthatches, woodpeckers. they all are like glomming around this smaller feeder. And so Carolyn, I think you're right on that. Thistle
Well, good
seed seems
ideas.
to
Thank
go
you.
bad.
Yeah. Good ideas. Thank you.
I think that's the end of our questions. Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask Mariette?
Yeah, you're probably,
Well, Mariette, I would like you to plug your chapter also. She is the president of the Kettle Moraine chapter, which you have a wonderful website. Theirs is a little bit different. And I've gone on that, and your resources, that buckthorn article is
yeah.
on your website. So go to the Kettle Moraine Wild Ones website. They have a nice resource area. And they also have some great yard. They had a wonderful yard tour for the public this summer that Lisa and I volunteered at. That was just spectacular. And sometimes their meetings are on Saturdays over in Eagle at the state forest. So sometimes if I see something that I'm not busy on a Saturday, I've gone to a few of their meetings that are, very well run and, everything. So I would say check you guys out too for, if you don't have enough to do already.
Well, thank you. Yes, thanks a lot. And of course, all of you are welcome to our meetings too. We have the indoor meetings. We'll have one next Saturday. And, the third Saturday of every month.
Is that still at the McGonigal Library, Mariette?
No, we don't have it there.
Okay.
Those are only special ones, and we haven't done that yet since
Okay.
COVID. These are at the Eagle headquarters of the DNR on Highway 59, just a little west of Eagle.
Okay. And as just an FYI to newer members, and maybe established members that don't realize it, as a member of Wild Ones, you are able to attend any chapter's events, whether Zoom or in person. As a member, if you're traveling somewhere and you're looking for something to fill one of your days, you can attend any program that any Wild Ones chapter offers. And Mariette, yes, your chapter is an amazing chapter with a lot of active members, and that makes things happen, such as that yard tour that Carolyn mentioned. It was spectacular.
Oh, thank you
Really
so much.
spectacular.
It was
Yeah.
a lot of work, and we're not doing it this next year, but we hope to do it maybe 2 years from now. We haven't decided, but yeah.
Awesome.
So we're so glad it turned out. We had lovely weather. That was
It was
big,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your limited vocal cord abilities there. You
I
did
hope it
great.
didn't
Appreciate
aggravate
it.
too many people.
And thank you everyone for your patience and your participation in the program. We'll work out the bugs for sure. We've got a great some new board members and new committee members. And certainly I encourage, if anyone has a few hours to offer to help out with our chapter and our functions, your time is well received and greatly appreciated. And Mariette, thank you so much. That was an amazing, amazing program.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. And hope that
Absolutely.
the voice didn't bother you too much.
No, it was great. So
Well,
thank
thank
you all for attending. Thank you, Mariette.
And I'd like to thank everyone for attending too. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
So look for the link.
Next
to our
month will be at the Brookfield Public Library. It's
Yeah.
a brand new space. I'm going to go check it out again. But so Brookfield Public Library next month with Mike Yanni.
Great. We'll see you all then. Take care and have a great month.